What's good, ladies and gentlemen? It's your boy Jerry from Subway, and today we're back with the movie for What If Deku Was the Son of All Might. Not only that, but the movie actually is going to be including a bonus part for all of you absolute chads that absolutely demolished the like button for that extra part that you guys have been wanting. If you guys want to go to that, then click on the timestamp that is up on screen right now. But for the rest of you guys that are watching it for the first time, trust me, you guys are in for a banger series. If they manage to smash 1,500 likes on part 3, which almost literally has never happened before, you guys gotta trust, like, this series is a banger. But with all that out of the way, if you guys going to enjoy, slap a like on the video, seeing as it helps it do a ton better on the algorithm. Go get yourself some snacks and share the video with a friend if you enjoy. That said, let's get started.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
So to start the story off, first we need to explain what Deku's childhood is going to be like, because yes, he is just literally just going to be the son of Inca Midoriya, and he is going to be raised by All Might. And raised is a very, very loose term, because if you really think about it, All Might is the #1 hero of the world, which means All Might has a lot of responsibilities that he has to deal with in day-to-day life. He's not exactly going to always be home for Izuku, but when he is always definitely going to be Izuku's hero, because it's his father. I mean, everybody's dad is their own hero when they're growing up. So that's kind of how Izuku is going to be raised as a childhood. However, once he gets to that ripe age of like 4 years old and everybody starts to wonder what the son of All Might's quirk is even going to be, Izuku begins to get a lot of the limelight placed on him and a lot of expectations on him early on. He's pretty much going to be the LeBron James son of the My Hero Academia world, and he's pretty much just going to be Bronny James with how much expectation people are going to put on him just because he's the son of a pro hero. That would mean that during his childhood, all he would hear about is, oh my god, he has so much potential. He's going to be even stronger than All Might. He's going to be this, he's going to be that, he's going to be this, he's going to be that. And this is all you would hear, just hype, expectation, and people saying that he's going to be great and that he's destined for so much just because he's the son of All Might. That's pretty much going to be all that he hears when he's starting to grow up, and there's just going to be so much hype around him that he's going to be Mr. Popular all throughout his early years until eventually, things would kind of slow down. And let me explain what I mean by that. See, growing up, because he's the son of All Might, this means that he would end up training harder than anybody else and eventually would get to sustained levels of strength by the time that he makes it to middle school. And yes, guys, he doesn't have a quirk. And you guys might be like, okay, so how's he the son of All Might and doesn't have a quirk? Well, think about it this way. I know that All Might has one for all, but this doesn't mean that he's going to just pass it on to his son since the quirk isn't his. It doesn't work like that. So basically, All Might, while yeah, Izuku is his son, that doesn't mean he's going to be getting a quirk. And because Inko in the original bared a son that had no quirk regardless, we're pretty much just going to be saying that Izuku is actually diagnosed as quirkless. But because this time around All Might knew what it was like to grow up without a quirk, and in this day and age he knows his son will suffer for that and be ridiculed, he decides to tell the media that his son has an enhancement quirk, and or goes on to tell his son that that's the reason why he's so strong and powerful, that he inherited that, but someday he might potentially get something else, something more powerful, depending on the situation. And Izuku from here would begin to be told during his early years from his father All Might that someday he might end up inheriting his quirk. And this would lead Izuku to be like, okay, so even though I don't have anything, someday I'm gonna get one for all from my dad. Like this is something that's just in his head, because it's like, who else would his dad give the quirk to other than his own son, his flesh and bone? He's literally his son. He's tied to him by blood. You can't give it to anybody else, right? That's just what Izuku would be thinking. And so eventually he would get to the age of 14 where almost all of the hype would have essentially died for Izuku, where people don't even believe he can even become a top 10 hero anymore. He's weak compared to All Might, and it gets to his head after hearing that he isn't good enough from the media. But one thing that keeps him going is the fact that he has his mother's support since his dad is always busy, and even the thought that he'll potentially get One For All someday, if not for sure. He's not sure when, but he knows that someday he'll unlock it and have the abilities of All Might himself, and so he trains his body up to the max, and he's pretty much as physically capable as you can get at this point. One day though, when Izuku's coming back home from school, this would be around the 12-month mark before the UA entrance exams would even start, Izuku would come home and hear his father in the kitchen. It's at this point that he's like, all right, I'm gonna just sneak on in here. And so he does, he makes no noise, and he can hear his father telling Inko something. He would hear him happily telling her about how he found a perfect successor, somebody with a noble heart, with a perfect body for One For All, and somebody who reminds him a lot of him when he was his age. And Izuku, hearing this, would immediately get angry and say, what? He bursts into the kitchen and his father's like, hey champ. From here, Izuku was be like, you're kidding, right? Tell me you're joking, dad. You didn't give One For All to somebody else. There's no way. Who would you even give it to that isn't your son? It was supposed to be me, damn it. As his father just looks back at him and says that he already gave him the quirk and that he figured that he wouldn't even get mad. But Izuku, he gets enraged and would pretty much go on to lunge at his dad and say, it should have been me. I'm your damn flesh and blood. How can you give that quirk to somebody else other than me? How is that even a thing that goes through your head? And from here, All Might just, he grabs his son and he restrains him. And from here, he proceeds to tell him that he would train his whole life, thinking that someday he was going to get the chance to inherit the quirk. But for All Might, his own father, to just give it to somebody else and discard his efforts and training for the past 14 years of his life, all he's thought about was someday inheriting One For All, soaring through the skies like his father, having the superhuman strength that nobody could rival. But he took that all away from him the second he gave it to somebody else. And All Might looks at him and puts a hand on his shoulder, telling him that he was never promised it, and that giving it to somebody else is not a bad thing, that One For All isn't something that just gets passed down from family to family. That's not how he inherited it. If that was the case, then, his mentor's son would have had it. And, Izuku's like, no, like it should have been me. And from here, All Might is like, you just don't understand. It's better to give other people a chance and to have more heroes than to just make an overpowered hero. And from here, Izuku, he's just like, I can't believe you. You're serious. From here, Izuku goes on to look at his dad and say, for years, I've lived under your shadow, dad. I've been deemed a reject by literally every single source of the media. Everybody's always talking about, oh, he messed up here. He did this. His grades are slipping. His 100% grade point average slipped down to a 97. All I hear is judgment from everybody. And the only person that I thought that could fix everything was you. The day I would get One For All was the day everything changed. And I finally got to live up to the expectations of being your son. I'm your son. Do you know what that means? That means that every time I do something, people bat an eye to me, and anytime I mess up, people treat it like it's the end of the world. You don't know what it's like because all you hear is how great you are, how amazing you are. That's all you ever get to hear. And I don't. I have to live in a different world than you. You'll never understand, Dad. From here, All Might literally looks at him in just silence, and Izuku grabs his stuff and pretty much would end up leaving for a couple of weeks. He disappears and All Might tries to find his son, but he literally can't do it. And from here, he would go off to live off of his money, staying at hotel to hotel for a couple of weeks, as one night, he's finally caught by Endeavor as he's trying to stop some crime that was going on in an alleyway nearby. All Might, after being informed of the fact that Endeavor caught his son stopping some crime, would lay into All Might and tell him that his son is not allowed to do that until he has a license. And All Might would pull some strings to make sure that none of this news would be heard by anybody, and so pretty much his son would get off scot-free because he's the son of All Might. Izuku on the way home would pretty much just stay silent in the car, and All Might would try to make him understand why he chose that other kid, looking him in the eyes and just noticing that there was nothing but blatant hatred in the eyes of Izuku for him. Izuku looks at him and says, no, I don't understand. All I've known is you is thinking that someday I would get that quirk because I'm your son. How could you do this to me, Dad? Do you just not care about me? Maybe it's because you don't spend any time with me, but I don't know what it is. You chose somebody else over me. I can't believe you. From here, he would go on and look at his dad, slam the door, and say, "All I'm gonna hear for the rest of my life is what a disappointment the son of All Might was." From here, he burges into his room, and All Might is just left there just to hear how, like, what his son just told him, that he'll literally be called a disappointment all his life because he's never gonna amount to what everybody thought he was. And after hearing that, All Might finally kind of understands what Izuku's trying to say. I mean, Izuku's not trying to say that, like, obviously he's not going to be a hero, because Izuku knows it damn well himself that he's definitely going to become a hero. But Izuku also knows that he's not going to become the kind of hero that everybody was expecting of him unless he has a quirk like One for All. Water break. Oh yeah, that hit the spot. But anyways, Izuku knows that he's not exactly going to be the hero that everybody thought he was going to be, and so he is just angry. And as the months would go by leading forward to the day of the entrance exam, or the recommendation exam in his case, Izuku would pretty much decide that he's done. Like, he literally is not going to speak to his dad. And so for the next couple of months, All Might would not be there. He would literally be training his new successor most of the time. And on the few occasions that he was there and tried to get closer to his son, he just pretty much brushed him off every single time. There was not a single day where All Might was capable of stopping Izuku's hatred for him, right? Like, there's not a single time where All Might was able to even get a conversation out of him. And when they were at the dinner table, Izuku would just grab his plate and leave. Like, he just grabs his stuff and goes straight to his room. He's like, "Nope, not talking to you." And All Might was thinking, he's a teenager, obviously, he'll get over it. He'll realize someday that, it's not the end of the world just because he doesn't have One for All. And that's just what All Might would be thinking, but he doesn't realize what he just did to his son. Like, could you guys, like, just put yourself in that situation? You were the son of, like, just imagine being the son of, like, a pro athlete, right? And all your life you trained to become a pro athlete like your dad, but you don't got it. Like some people got it and some people don't. And you just don't have the athleticism, you just don't have the height, you just don't, something, right? And you're just not going to be able to amount to what everybody thought that you were going to. They think that you're going to be better or even on par or something, but not everybody's built the same, and not everybody can handle the pressures of being a star. And Izuku was kind of letting this pressure get to him. The pressure of hearing the media every single day since he's a kid. This is something that would genuinely be heartbreaking for him. And because he's not old enough to understand or manage himself or even be taught what to do, he would never understand how to pretty much cope with what's going on in his life. And so eventually, after a couple of months would pass, Izuku would continue training until one day Izuku would notice that, he essentially is just like, how do I put this? Izuku would be getting so rage filled that it starts to get to the point where he considers just not even becoming a hero anymore. Like, he's not even gonna become the hero that everybody wants him to, so he might as well not become a hero at all. Because if he doesn't become a hero, then people can't tell him that he was a bad hero. So instead, what does Izuku do? No, he's not going to just turn to villain. He's not going to be like, all right, if I can't be a hero, I'm going to be a villain. Because it's the same thing. He's not going to be that good of a villain if he can't even be that good of a hero, right? And pretty much what ends up happening is Izuku decides that he's just gonna pretty much stop, right? He ends up just like stopping the training entirely, and for an entire 3 months Izuku would just not train. He would proceed to really not do much of anything and just continue working out like normal, just to keep his physique up, because that's like pretty much the only thing that he really has going for himself. And eventually one day, when he's stumbling through the web, he would end up finding a strange page, right? He clicks on it, and it eventually redirects him to another page, which redirects him to another. And ultimately, he would find himself in this strange website, right? Where it says looking for villains, right? Villains for hire or whatever. And, from here, Izuku's like, what do I have to lose? So he ends up going off to try to pretty much find this villain association, which is the League of Villains. And what pretty much ends up happening is Izuku, because he's kind of just in like this weak mental state, what ended up going over, right? He ends up meeting the broker for the League of Villains, and the broker ends up determining that the son of All Might as a villain, like, that's just great. So he immediately gets into contact with One For All, and of course One For All knows exactly who the son of All Might is. I mean, the dude is all over the news all the time. Every single thing he does is being monitored like he's a baby or something, right? And All For One, as soon as he gets wind of this, he would immediately establish a meeting to get to know the kid, right? And so pretty much what ends up happening is All For One would end up essentially kind of establishing a meeting day for Izuku to essentially talk to him, right? And so what happens this day is Izuku would wake up, right? He eats breakfast and stuff, and eventually he goes to his room, grabs his stuff, and just pretty much makes his way towards the location. He would make his way towards some weird backway alleyway, and when he's there, he would end up meeting this guy with purple mist all over his body, yellow eyes, and this strange man with like this white, bluish tinted hair and like very, very chapped lips, not to mention a little bit of a weirdo. But Izuku just ends up going with them regardless, because what does he have to lose? He's gonna die. Like, okay, if he dies, people are just gonna spread it all over the media that he was weak and that he died, so it doesn't matter. Whatever he does is always gonna get judged. So Izuku just stopped caring, honestly. And from here, he ends up finally making his way out of the portal and seeing a man with a mask on his head. Izuku would immediately sit down, and All For One would treat him like a superstar. He would clap and say, "The man of the hour. Glad you could make it, kid." From here, Izuku goes on to sit down and say, "So, what's the deal with this little organization you got going on? I heard that you guys wanted my talents. I don't really know why." And All For One looks at him and begins to essentially begin talking to the kid. Izuku goes on to inform One For All of the fact that it's a quirk that can get passed down, and All For One tells them that he knows all about it, that it's actually a quirk that he gave to his brother because he wanted his brother to essentially be strong, to not fall down to the rest of the other weaklings, but his brother didn't exactly agree with his ideas that the strong should be at the top. So his brother decided to overthrow him, and thus many users have gone by trying to stop him from getting the world that he desires, where the strong lead. All For One begins to pretty much use his charisma and the fact that Izuku is mentally in a weakened state right now to convince him of the fact that the League of Villains is not an evil association, convince him of the fact that he's not evil, and pretty much get it into Izuku's head that if he was to join the League of Villains, he's doing it for the right reasons. He would even tell him that if he wants, he could maybe even end up getting One For All for him, that he has the ability to steal quirks from people, and Izuku, once he hears that, would be like, you do? From here, All For One is like, "Of course I do, my child," as he proceeds to tell him that he can help him achieve his potential, that if his father doesn't see that within him, he can. And Izuku, after hearing this, would sit down and just contemplate his thoughts, just thinking to himself if it's truly worth it to go to a life of villainy just because he doesn't have One For All. He would think to himself that he has tons of potential as a hero, but as soon as All For One begins to see that, Izuku's thinking about it and he's not sure, All For One would tell him, "I could even give you a quirk." And after Izuku hears getting a quirk, that was all he really needed to hear, because Izuku knows he's quirkless, but the media just thinks he has some sort of enhancement quirk, and the reason they think that is because of Izuku's insane training regimen. The only reason it seems like he's enhanced is because of the fact that All For One, just like I said, All For One was the one who pretty much ended up, just because of his training, and the only reason that it seems enhanced is because he's just that much stronger because of his training. So that's the only reason people genuinely kind of believe him. But people are starting to question if it's not just superhuman strength, then he might just be quirkless, right? And it's at this point that Izuku, once he hears the proposition of the idea of getting a quirk, would finally begin to entice him, right? Izuku, once he hears this from All For One, would kind of just immediately just be like, "I'm in." And All For One smiles like internally. He's just like, perfect, right? And from here, Izuku just goes on to shake the hand of All For One, and All For One just looks at Izuku and says, "You'll be like a son to me from now on. If All Might can't raise you properly, then I'll be your father figure." As from here, Izuku says, "Whatever, do as you please, dude." And he would end up pretty much asking him when he's gonna get that quirk of his. And All For One ends up informing him that he'll get his quirk when he proves that he is, worthy, and when he proves that he is not, just there on the side of his father and trying to just get intel on the villains. He needs to prove his allegiance to them. And so he has one mission for him: kill his father. Izuku, once he hears this mission from All For One, would be absolutely shocked. It would almost be as if time would completely stop for the both of them, and Izuku would like drop his glass, like which had like some alcohol in it, right? And All For One like just looks at him and says, "That's the mission. Starting today, you are going to be getting into UA. You're going to need to get into Class 1A, and I have information telling me that All Might is going to be working there." Izuku looks to All For One and tells him that he is, and from here, All For One goes on to tell Izuku that there should not be a problem, and that if he wants that quirk that's going to give him the abilities to rival that of even his father, he needs to make sure that his father is out of the picture. But I mean, even if his father's there, it's not like his father's really been too much of a help for him. But he can change things for him. He can make things different. He can give him the life and the admiration that he's always deserved. And Izuku, after hearing this, would just contemplate on what All For One said, just thinking to himself if it would truly be worth it to kill his own dad just because he didn't give him All For One. Eventually, he ends up leaving the room and just thinking about this, and All For One gives him his number, telling him to give him a call. And, All For One at this point would pretty much begin to entice Izuku with the idea of someday, if he was to truly go through with it, lead the organization and be one of the top heads in the world. Only right next to him. Like, he wouldn't be a pawn to him, telling him that he would be his right-hand man. And, from here, we essentially get Izuku contemplating this for the next couple of days. He would resume his training and go even harder than he would have ever done before, and eventually the day of the examination would arrive, where Izuku goes forth and has to take the recommendation exam. Okay, so jumping back into part 2, we immediately cut back with the story with Izuku looking down at the pavement floor. He's outside of the UA area, and he's pretty much just hyping himself up to get ready for the portion that he's about to have to take, the recommendation exam. Now, nothing crazy is actually going to be happening here, and we pretty much just get Izuku walking in and slightly just thinking about what it is he's about to have to do. He would put in a little application to take in a weapon, seeing as he doesn't actually have a quirk, and the only people who really know that are just a select few. So he is allowed to bring in a support item scythe, mind you, and he would go inside and pretty much begin wreaking havoc on the exam. Now, what does the exam consist of? Well, from what we've seen from the flashbacks that we've gotten from either Todoroki or Momo and or Inasa, we've seen that it either consists of a race and potentially a robot portion where they have to try to combat against a 3, a 2, and a 1-pointer just to see how exactly they would handle the situation. I definitely think there is a written portion, and I definitely think that there's probably something else like a quirk kind of assessment thing where they try to see how good your control is with your quirk or something. And that's pretty much what Izuku is going to have to do. Now, these exams are a bit more private than the normal ones, so when it comes to the exam, Izuku ends up coming in about 3rd place when it comes to out of the entire score that he could have gotten. And once he leaves the area, people begin to question him, what place did you get? And Izuku, he's just oh, I got 3rd place in the recommendation exams, right? Now, one of the people who was there was actually a reporter, and this reporter took that statement that Izuku just made and ran with it. She immediately went on to her little airing podcasting majigger and just pretty much proceeded to slap that on an article and just publish it immediately. That ended up going viral, and from there people started to talk about how overhyped the son of All Might is, talking about just how weak he is compared to his old man, and pretty much just bringing comparisons between himself and All Might left and right, calling him the biggest failure ever, and that Todoroki, the son of the number 2 hero, is most definitely going to be something that they should be looking out for, and not the son of All Might, seeing as he's clearly not the same as his father, right? Now, once Izuku hears this and catches wind of all this article and stuff like that, this would be the final nail in the coffin, which would cause Izuku to call back All For One and essentially tell him that he's in. Call would go something like this. Beep, 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 beep. He's typing in this stuff. I'm sorry. Whenever I think of somebody calling somebody, I picture the big phone that had the big buttons on it, and just him having to click on it, and then you know what I mean? And that's pretty much kind of what happens, but not really, seeing as he has a smartphone. But he does end up reaching back out to All For One, and immediately, the call answers. He's like, And All For One answers, and he has like this deep voice, and he just goes on to say, "So, do you accept?" From here, Izuku says, "I'm all in." And from here, All For One smiles, saying, "Perfect. Meet me here and here." And from here, Izuku would go to the location that All For One specified, going on to essentially be picked up by Kurogiri and teleported straight to All For One. It's here where All For One would break down what exactly he wants him to do, and Izuku would pretty much be completely down to do what it is that he has to now. Essentially, Izuku is going to be playing the part of the UA traitor, right? Now, in the original, the person who does that is Yugi Aoyama, right? But this time around, we don't need him as a character, so he will completely be written off in exchange for the successor of One For All, somebody who is legitimately going to be kind of like the spitting image of All Might when he was young. Instead of having blonde hair, he's going to be having this like strange, instead of having blonde hair, I think that we're going to give him like, what colored hair would be cool? Wow, that's actually kind of interesting. Like, what should we do when it comes to this brand new character? Okay, so let's just say that when it comes to this character, he's going to be having brown hair, and he's going to be having these like cool multicolor like blue and red eyes. He is quirkless. However, he did work out as a pastime, seeing as he was a full-time gym rat. And so that's the way that he's actually going to be able to handle the quirk that is One For All. Now, this is essentially what would lead us into the portion of time where Izuku gets briefed down on the plan, right? And essentially the plan consists of Izuku informing them about All Might's weakness. And Izuku does it just fine. Izuku goes on to tell everybody, and by everybody I mean Shigaraki, Kurogiri, and All For One, about the weakness of his father All Might. And that weakness would be his side. He has like a gaping wound. Once they find out about this, Izuku would kind of be wondering if he did the right thing, because it's like when he was a kid, All Might was much more around for him than he was now, but it almost seems like All Might just doesn't care for him. Like he literally was willing to trade him for some random kid that he's never met, and he literally pays way more attention to this guy than he would have ever paid attention to him, who's literally the son. So Izuku as of this current moment is just not thinking about anything but the fact that he feels betrayed, and so would go ahead with the plan. Eventually, this would lead him to make his way towards the classroom of 1A, and he would eventually sit down only to be interrupted when a couple of other people walk inside, and finally the blue-haired boy would end up walking in, going over towards Bakugo's direction and proceeding to be absolutely annoying, just beginning to completely try to berate Bakugo and tell him that he needs to take his feet off the desk, right? Now, it's at this moment that the successor to All Might would walk into the classroom, and when Izuku sees him, he just kind of grits his teeth, because like Izuku knows that he was way better built for One For All than this kid ever was. Izuku had trained his entire life, so if he would have inherited it, he probably could have gotten the full 100% maximum usage rate out of the quirk. But because this guy's there, he'll never get to know what that feels like. And this enrages Izuku like no other. This makes him so incredibly frustrated, and eventually Izuku would just kind of begin to slightly start showing it. His demeanor begins to immediately change, and the only person who would seem to actually catch wind of this would be Aizawa. It's at this moment that we would pretty much have Aizawa wake up and begin to essentially tell all of the students about the situation in terms of get these on and meet me outside. Now, everybody goes on and does so, and from here, Bakugo would be tossed a ball, to which he would throw it and get about 700 and something meters, right? Following this, Kirishima, Mina, and a bunch of other people would begin to excitedly say that this is fun. And as soon as that comes out of their mouth, Aizawa immediately goes on to threaten them with expulsion, saying that whoever comes in last place is, well, gonna get expelled. And following this, everybody finally snaps into reality, with Izuku even having a bit of worries in his mind. Because yeah, whatever, he's the son of All Might, he's very well trained when it comes to his physical body, but he still doesn't have a quirk. And so this would lead Izuku to barely even scratch at the top 5. One person who definitely took notice of this would be Bakugo, and Bakugo would be the first to point out how much of a disappointment Izuku is. Now, obviously we know Bakugo and Izuku have never formally interacted yet, just because of the nature of the story, but Bakugo, with his, very, how do I put this, vibrant personality, would definitely be willing to come in and speak his truth. And what is his truth? Well, it's just that he doesn't think that Izuku should even be called the son of the number one hero, the son of the number one hero, All Might. So Bakugo pretty much blatantly says that to Izuku, and while Izuku, yeah, he's heard the things on the media, but he's never physically had somebody go up to him and straight up just say that, he is not living up to his expectations, pretty much calling him a failure. And Bakugo would literally use that same wording. He would call Izuku a blatant failure. Izuku, after hearing this, would grit his teeth and his ball of his fist up as tight as possible. And just thinking about what he has to do now, he's able to basically slightly calm down. Now, is he able to just immediately just calm himself down? Absolutely not. But he would be able to hold his temper just long enough for, Aizawa to essentially separate both himself and Bakugo from the equation. Now, once this happens, Izuku just grabs his stuff and makes his way towards home, right? And once he's there, he would pretty much end up just kind of going on his phone and sending a couple messages back to All for One, saying that there is somebody on their hit list now. And that person is Katsuki Bakugo of Class 1A. Now you guys might be like, why is Izuku going to that length just because somebody talks some trash? We'll put it like this. Imagine that for years, everybody could talk trash to you, right? You just wake up, so much trash talk all over the place, right? And it's all through the screen of a phone. So what are you going to do? You're not going to go beat these people up. If you try to, you would never end. But finally, the day comes where somebody says that to you face to face. And in a sense, I guess you could say that all of those frustrated feelings that you feel for everybody else would finally have somebody to pretty much manifest themselves in real life. So this would kind of give you the opportunity to finally do something with all those other times that you wanted to do something yourself. And this is kind of the situation that we're going to be finding ourselves in with this dilemma that is actually going on right now. And so Izuku makes the quick call, and the situation is essentially going to be taken care of by All for One, right? And so what pretty much ends up happening is about 3 days would go by, and suddenly they would all find themselves in the classroom until suddenly All Might busts through the door. Immediately he begins just talking to everybody with a giant smile on his face, and Izuku looks towards his father with All Might, just getting praise from everybody there except for his own son, which would definitely sadden him. But what's he gonna do? Call his own son out in front of everybody and potentially make Izuku way angrier at him than he already was? I mean, for Christ's sake, All Might has finally begun to feel bad for his son, because for the first time in forever, after having his own son finally tell him the struggles that he's been through, just because he's been the son of All Might finally took notice of this and begun to scroll through the web and see all the horrible things that people have said about his son. People have genuinely literally sent him death threats because he's such a weak loser that people have said that if they were in his position, they'd be way more powerful. Having the genes of All Might by your side, they would have actually been useful, useful baby reproduction juices. I can't say the word because it's I'm gonna get the yellow check mark, but you guys know what I mean, right? Saying that he was a waste of blank word, right? And Izuku just constantly has to hear that all the time, right? And now All Might finally understands the scale and magnitude of just what he did. Okay, yeah, was All Might purposefully trying to screw his son over? Absolutely not. That's not the kind of person that All Might is, and that's just not the way that I'm going to be carrying his personality. I'm not doing that just for the sake of the story. But All Might definitely was a little bit negligent to his own son and give a little bit more attention to other people that he probably shouldn't have, seeing as he has a whole son and wife at home. That said, though, we would end up getting a scene where All Might tries to get closer to Izuku and be like, hey, so how's UA so far? But Izuku just kind of brushes him off and goes over to the line with people asking him why he doesn't talk to his own dad. And Izuku wouldn't even respond. He'd say, stay out of your business. This isn't any of your business, so stay out of it. And nobody really says anything back to Izuku because, okay, yeah, whatever, he's quirkless, he's still way stronger than any of them could ever hope to be. Let's just definitely throw that out there. He's definitely way more powerful than all of them combined. And so we would pretty much end up, well, not really, but like, you know what I mean? Like he would pretty much end up scrapping most of them except for like the exception of potentially Bakugo and or Todoroki. But everybody else, they would completely get smoked by Izuku. Regardless though, we would end up jumping into the situation that is the 2v2 versus battles, and Izuku would end up drawing the lottery numbers, and he essentially ends up getting paired with, let's see, who should Izuku get paired with? I'm going to be saying that Izuku is actually going to be having to face off against Todoroki. Now, Todoroki's teammate is going to be... I think that we should make Todoroki's teammate Mineta, and that Todoroki is going to have to be the villain for this time, and Izuku's teammate is going to be Ida. Okay, Ida's going to be Izuku's teammate. I think that's fair. I think that kind of balances it out because Mineta doesn't really count as a teammate. He kind of counts as more of a hindrance, but you know, Ida, he actually kind of counts as something. But regardless though, we would end up jumping into the battle, and the way that I see this all starting is essentially All Might explaining the rules, and finally Todoroki and Mineta in the building towards the top, right? They would start there, and the way that I see this all going down is essentially Todoroki ends up freezing the entire building and just walking down expecting both of them to be frozen. However, he'd be very, very shocked when he realizes that Izuku wasn't actually frozen whatsoever. Only Ida was. And when Todoroki would turn the corner, Izuku would send a strong flying kick at the direction of Todoroki, which Todoroki wouldn't be able to dodge and would get hit straight in the face by. Followed by a quick just right hook to the face, and finally a left-handed uppercut, which Todoroki would completely eat, right? He gets sent back flying onto the ground, and Todoroki would slide on the ice before getting up quickly and forming a barrier of ice between himself and, you know, All Might's son. He opens the door to the room right next to them and then proceeds to break the wall to get on the same level where Todoroki's at, to proceed to essentially try to rush in at him again, but Todoroki just immediately stomps his foot down and says that's it, as he freezes Izuku entirely, and from here, Todoroki and the villain team are completely declared the winners. It was a one-sided stomp, and everybody just witnessed Izuku get completely outclassed by the son of the number 2 hero. Everybody after this would begin saying that it looks like the son of the number 2 hero is way stronger than the son of the number 1, with people saying that it's kind of ironic and that they would have never guessed that'd be the case. From all the things that they've seen from him during the years, like he seemed to be so powerful around like elementary school days, but once he made it to middle school, he just kind of seemed to get like, it almost looked like he just wasn't progressing anymore. You can only get so strong in the human body with its basic capabilities, and Izuku is at that level where he just really can't do much against people like Todoroki, who have insanely overpowered quirks that could completely shut him out and keep him at a distance. Seeing as he has to fight close range, when somebody keeps him at a distance, Izuku is pretty much just rendered useless. It's his kryptonite. And so once Izuku makes his way towards out of there, he ends up pretty much seeing that everybody is blatantly just knowing now that he's weak. And they're all beginning to question like what it is that they've heard about him their whole lives. Like they were all told that he was so strong, that he was the next upcoming, that he would be even stronger than All Might someday. But from what they're seeing, it looks like he's not anything near All Might. He's not even half of him, not even 1/4. Everybody would be thinking this, and this will just enforce Bakugo to say, just as I thought, you're so weak you couldn't even defeat Icy Hot over there. The son of the number 2 hero just kicked your ass. I'd be embarrassed if I was you. I wouldn't even dare to call myself the son of All Might. I should be his son, not some lame washed out stuff. Not some, sorry, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, not some lame washed up dumbass like you. Following this, Izuku goes on to like get in front of Bakugo's face, and immediately All Might steps in between the two of them, saying that's enough, telling Izuku to go to his office and for Bakugo to essentially not say that again, or he's going to be forced to give him detention. Izuku angrily walks towards the direction of All Might's desk, and from here, Izuku just sits down. All Might comes into the room and begins to essentially just sit down and be like, look, I know that it isn't easy for you to hear this kind of thing, but it happens to me as well. I also have to deal with the media. I also have to deal with people judging me every time I go somewhere. That's not a bad thing. You'll get used to it. Trust me, kid. And Izuku says, you don't know. You don't understand what it's like. Being your son is like living in constant hell. I'll never get rid of these people and their eyes watching my every movement. You saw the way that everybody in there treated me as soon as they saw me lose to that kid. Everybody thinks I'm beneath you, like I'm not worthy of being your son. As if being your son is some sort of forsaken title that immediately was supposed to make me strong. That wasn't it. You're not even naturally strong yourself. You'd be a weakling. You'd be even worse off than me if you didn't have that amazing quirk of yours. And All Might would just kind of sit there and not say anything. As Izuku says, to hell with you. He's going home by himself and not to talk to him anymore. As All Might is just left there in the room silent, as suddenly his successor would walk close to the door, hear what just happened, and from here Izuku bump checks the kid and would pretty much just walk out of the room, as All Might would just be left there to wonder if he made the right choice. His successor steps in and asks him if he's interrupting anything, and All Might immediately perks up and says no. From here, he would say that he heard that, and he asks if he caused him trouble for giving him the quirk. All Might says that he's not going to regret it or be taking that quirk back if he thinks that that's the case, that he would never do that to him, and that he's going to be his successor, whether his own son likes it or not. From here, Izuku says there's going to be a USJ event, 3 days. Bring every. We pick off our story with Izuku meeting All for One, and it's during this meeting that All for One would finally tell Izuku that it seems that his allegiance to the League of Villains is one that is true. He would look at Izuku and go on to tell him how proud he has made him of the choice that he's made, and Izuku would go on to say that he's glad he could make somebody proud, although he's not sure how he feels about the fact that he's helping his father's own worst enemy out. Izuku doesn't really care so long as he gets the quirk of One for All, and All for One pretty much ends up telling him that if they defeat All Might and kill him, he is more than just promised that quirk, that he will be his own successor and inherit his own quirk of All for One. Shigaraki would be right there in the room, and from here he would say, "What? You're gonna give it to that brat? No way. I've been here longer. I'll kill him if you do." And from here, All for One looks to the direction of Shigaraki as he simply says, "Quiet, Tomura." He proceeds to walk towards him as Shigaraki's like, "What are you doing, master?" But it's at this point that All for One would put his hand straight over the face of Shigaraki, and he would proceed to essentially begin to drain out the quirk of decay straight out of him. This would lead Izuku to then be looked at by All for One as he would say, "Lower your head." And from here, All for One proceeds to give the quirk of decay straight to Izuku, as Izuku can feel the power coursing through him, and now finally knowing what it's like to have a quirk would be impressed nonetheless. Like, he would feel like a completely different person. Izuku feels like he was just reinvigorated with power, with strength, with just resilience, everything. It feels incredible. Izuku would wonder, is this really what I've been missing my entire life? Guess I would have known what this was like if my father would have given me my quirk, but instead he chose that other kid. I'll never forgive you for that, Dad. From here, he would go on to essentially look to All for One and tell him that the plan will go down like this. If he knows his father, and he does, his father will most likely end up arriving there with everybody else. And the best course of action would be for Kurogiri to essentially arrive at the USJ and to kind of like scope out the area, I guess you could say. Like, it would be very smart if I'm having a little bit of trouble explaining this, but pretty much he's trying to say that it would be extremely smart for Kurogiri to scope the area out and to find the best locations to teleport most of the students in, saying that this time they're not going to be doing things sloppily and that they're not going to be taking many men. They just need a handful of well-selected ones that are very competent and are capable of doing what they need. So the army that they bring to the USJ event is actually going to be halved, and there's only going to be half as many soldiers in the areas that would benefit them, like the water people and the water people, the people who have like earth powers and the mountain rages and stuff like that. And not to mention, All for One would end up handing a couple of them, the strongest ones of each section, an enhancement, quirk, amplification drug, just in case anything were to go wrong. Izuku would even suggest maybe taking 2 Nomus just in case. One of the Nomus that is there at the USJ, and a couple, like 2 more like weaker Nomus just in case. Like, this is not something that they'll most likely need, but it's better to be safe than sorry. And so All for One would decide that this is actually way better of a plan than what Shigaraki had thought of. Izuku says that he will most likely start everything, and that they should start the entire operation off with a kind of jamming system so that they can't contact the main heroes at the area, right? And so from here, the plan would pretty much just begin to be made by Izuku and All for One. And the very next day, what would end up happening is Izuku would go to school just like normal. Izuku's not acting out of the ordinary whatsoever. However, after school, he does end up making his way towards the USJ to scope the area out with Kurogiri. And once there, they end up finding out the best course of action for everything, making the plan up as they go. And the next 2 days would just be the most impatient days of his life. Izuku would literally not dare look at his father in the eyes, not once. And All Might would have tried during that time to pretty much like say sorry for not choosing him for the quirk, but he can't take it back now. That would be completely unfair to him. But Izuku does finally talk back to him. Before entering his room, he says, "Unfair? You want to talk about unfair? Unfair is filling your child's head up with dreams of inheriting your quirk, and then the day that it finally should come, the day that he's finally ready to, after all the years of training, to just rip it away from him and give it to somebody else, then to go over and treat him better than you ever treated your son. You care about that successor of yours more than you care about your own son. But don't worry, you'll get what's coming to you soon." He slams the door on All Might's face, and All Might tries to budge in, right? But when All Might ends up coming into the door, Izuku just looks at him and says, "Dad, I swear to God, if you take one step in my room, this is not going to be fun for you." And All Might would proceed to essentially, like, he doesn't even want to fight his son. Like, he's like, whatever. Like, he literally is just like, I don't know what to do. Like, this kid, like, he's changed so much ever since he didn't get the quirk. And it's like, bro, that quirk literally should have been your son's. Like, you can't blame him. But regardless though, Izuku in his rage would continue with this type of attitude for the following couple of days. And Izuku would decide that there will be 3 casualties the day of the the USJ. Number 1 will be Katsuki Bakugo. Number 2 will be the successor of One for All. And number 3 will be All Might himself. Those are the 3 people that Izuku wants to kill most of all. The rest of them can live if they really want, but if anybody gets hurt, they get hurt, I guess. From here, what would end up happening is essentially the day would finally arrive, and Ida would have already been picked as class president. Izuku this time wouldn't have actually been picked, and we don't even get the scene where Ida pretty much leads everybody out of the conflict. That is the conflict with the news reporters. But regardless, we do end up getting this really cool scene where everybody's on the bus and Izuku kind of is like inner monologuing, right? If you guys have even seen Death Note, it's something similar to that, where Izuku just has a smile on his face, and because of the fact that All Might is actually his dad, he would know to essentially make it so that All Might will most likely make his way there, right? Basically, he would proceed to have it so that somebody like Izuku, now that he knows that All Might won't be there because he ended up using his quirk all day, and like he realizes that All Might isn't joining them, Izuku would pretty much end up knowing that, his phone needs to be the one to send the signal to his father, All Might, or to just kind of get the message across to his father some way or another, right? And so what would he do? He would essentially end up telling Kurogiri to make it seem as if one of the students escaped, and preferably that student should be Ida. Tenya Ida, the blue-haired boy with the strange white armor. And so he would go off in search of All Might, and while that's happening, all of the other students at this current moment would pretty much be getting picked off one by one. Suyu and Mineta, as well as Izuku, would end up making their way towards the boat portion, and they would all be defeated. And, Izuku would be defeated with kind of a little bit of a wink, as, he gets punched in the face by one of the villains and gets completely knocked out, right? Suyu and Mineta, following this, were completely unable to defend themselves, and they would all get tied up, with Izuku being loosely tied up so he can finally make his reveal once his father arrives. Izuku would be tied up in front of the man himself, all for one. And, you know, right now, as of this current moment, I'm going to be saying that he's using this strange shape-shifting quirk, right? Where he has the body of like, what's it called? No, I'm not going to say he's using a shape-shifting quirk itself. I'm just going to be saying that he whatever. Let's give him the shape-shifting quirk, seeing as Toga and Dabi and all of them still haven't become yet members of the League of Villains. So what ends up happening here is All For One is the one who is currently present there in the middle of it all with a shape-shifting quirk transformed into Toya. No, not Toya, but what's it called? Shigaraki, right? Now, because he's transformed into Shigaraki, he would try to mimic all of his attributes in the way that he acts and just kind of gives off this man-child persona. But it isn't until All Might arrives that everything would finally start changing. Once the villains see All Might scowl and All Might notices that all of the kids have pretty much been but defeated, even his own son, he would begin being like, oh, what do I do? Like, how do I help? Not only that, but his own successor as of this current moment is currently having to face off against one low-end Nomu, right? Now, obviously, he would be doing fairly well when it comes to facing off against this Nomu because the successor actually has a great access to already a solid 35% of full cowling, something that Izuku would not have been able to get to until like about season 5 or 6. Like, that's insane. So his successor is already displaying insane levels of strength and would easily be able to take care of the low-end Nomus. This would lead to the high-end Nomu eventually coming in, and not the high-end one, but you know, the one that we see in the USJ, right? And once he has to fight that one, that's where the battle would kind of begin to shift gears. As of that moment, it would change and we would pretty much end up getting a scene where All Might ends up busting in and pretty much saving his successor, noticing that Izuku was tied up by ropes and being held right by All For One. And, you know, he would end up having to face off against the Nomu, right? Now, All Might, I do genuinely believe, would be able to defeat the Nomu. And so we are going to be giving him that, seeing as the successor is actually there to help him out and back him up. He would not lose as much stamina or steam as he would in the original. But regardless, his, stamina is already running low. So it would be very hard for All Might to keep up whatsoever. And so we end up kind of getting this moment where once All For One notices that All Might wins, he would clap and say, "All Might, it's been quite a while since I've seen you." And from here, you know, All Might is like, "All For One?" You know, he's shocked because he's like, "I thought you dead, huh? You thought I died. Well, you can't get rid of me that easily, Toshinori. This is your successor, huh? I kind of figured that you would choose your son someday, not him. And I'm pretty sure that's what your own son would have thought." From here, Izuku would proceed to get up and unravel everything as he stands right next to All For One, and he proceeds to say, "Hey, father, been a while, huh?" And from here, you know, All Might is like, "No, you didn't. I knew you were mad, but to go to this lengths just to spite me. Izuku, please tell me you're lying. Please tell me that this is some sort of shape-shifting quirk or something. Please, don't join him. You don't know what this man can do. You don't know what this man has done to our family. You don't know what he's done to me, what he's gonna do to the world. You have to trust me on this one, Izuku. Please, just trust me this one time. Just once in your life, listen to me." And from here, Izuku goes on to say, "Once in my life? How about once in your life you take the moment to notice me? This is the first time in 15 years that you noticed me. The only time that you actually took the time out of your day in the past 4 years to actually give a damn about your own son. Ever since that day you got injured, you've been different. You've been acting strange. You don't pay attention to mother or I. You don't come home as much. You're always busy with your doctor appointments, with fighting crime, staying in other places, and not even giving a damn about your family. You're never there for us. And even when I thought that everything would be fine because someday at the very minimum I'd get to inherit your quirk, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do, Dad? Tell me, huh? You give it to somebody else and not me. I deserved it. I needed that quirk. And now I'm gonna take it. And I'm gonna kill your successor right in front of you. As from here, All For One laughs and says, "And you think that's it, All Might? Not only did I turn your son on my side, but I also turned Nana Shimura's grandson to mine as well. Shigaraki, he is he is Nana Shimura's grandson, so his name is Shigaraki Tomura, right?" And from here, All Might just kind of has like that mental breakdown scene that we would get in the Camino Ward incident, where he pretty much freaks out and like he loses his cool for a second. And with this happening, a successor right beside him watching his hero have this crazy reaction would not know what to do. But he does know one thing: he needs to bring his son back, and at the very least do something good. So what does he do? He says, "I can't listen to this anymore. All Might, snap out of it. You need to get your head in the game. There's villains in front of us, and whether you want to accept it or not, your own son is now one of them. So are you going to help me take them down, or are we going to let everybody here at the USJ die?" From here, All Might snaps back into reason, and they would both lunge at each other, with Izuku rushing at the new successor of One For All, and All For One and All Might clashing fists. The battle would be explosive, and Izuku would land blow after blow on the successor of One For All. Izuku would end up actually landing a couple of attacks that wouldn't actually be able to decay everything, but slowly during the battle, Izuku would begin to get more and more access to the abilities of decay, and so would be able to actually put up a huge amount of a fight, and would even be able to begin decaying the surrounding area, leading the successor to eventually have to fight so hard that he ends up having to unlock float in a last second effort to try to stay off of the ground and not decay himself. The decaying process wouldn't spread too far, considering Izuku is the one who's in control of it and would only want to kill him, not everybody else. But it's at this moment that another individual would come flying in, this being Bakugo, and he would come in and say, "The son of All Might's a villain, huh? I guess now I really get the chance to finish this." He comes blasting in with an explosion and tries to shoot Izuku with the howitzer impact, but Izuku blitzes at him and proceeds to grab Bakugo straight by the face. From here, Bakugo would let out a gut-wrenching scream as his entire face would begin to decay, and it would be gruesome to watch. It's almost like the disappearances of Infinity War, as you know, after Thanos snapped, and you know, Bakugo's body just begins to decay in front of everybody, with Izuku saying, "Don't you dare call me weak again. If I'm so weak, how come you're dead?" But the successor of All Might would immediately get angry at that, rush in and unlock more and more of his potential slowly as the battle would rage on. It would be as if he would be shattering his limits slowly, and as this is all happening, All For One and All Might would be going out in an all-out battle, a brawl of titans, where each of them is not giving the other a single step forward, and they're going completely out for blood. Eventually, though, both of them would end up finally getting into their last clash, with each of them yelling each other's respective name. All Might screaming, "All For One!" and All For One screaming, "All Might, you die now!" As, you know, they're charging up their massive attacks and they clash, and, you know, it would be United States of Smash Brawl versus the gigantic fist that All For One is able to create. And they're both just going at it, you know, titans are clashing, and eventually the wind pressure would be blowing into the battle between Izuku and the successor of All Might, who, you know, I know it's kind of late, but we might as well give a name. The successor I'm going to be saying is just going to be named Toya. Why not? Like, it's not Dabi, but let's just give him the name Toya because it's easy to remember, right? Now, Izuku and Toya would be going at it, right? And, you know, they're both, you know, throwing hands. And at this moment, you know, Toya is pretty much overwhelming Izuku. But as this is all happening and Izuku is watching, you know, his mentor, who, you know, his evil mentor, go at it with his father, he would kind of break through his limits because he doesn't want to see his father win. He knows what will happen. If his father wasn't willing to give him the quirk of All For One, then he'll definitely be willing to throw his own son into the jail. So Izuku doesn't want to go there, and so one thing would kind of like snap inside of Izuku's head, and he would be able to activate and go further beyond the abilities that he already has. However, this would be after All Might defeats All For One, and in the final clash, he would switch the power from one arm to another and just bam, straight at All For One's face, completely taking him out of the battle, as Izuku would land back on the floor, right? And at this moment, he proceeds to essentially just kind of completely just step on the ground, right? And the decay ability would lunge at the direction of All Might, and All Might would quickly be able to dodge out of the way using the last remnants of One For All that he has left, as Izuku would blitz in, and the successor Toya would try to stop him, but it would be far too late. Izuku blitzes in and grabs at the face of All Might and would proceed to essentially decay him instantly. All Might, after having felt this, would fall to the ground and not be able to even utter sorry or like finish him off for me or you're next, nothing. He would just die immediately, and All For One would watch this scene as he's still semi-conscious and would laugh. As it's at this moment that rage would overfill Toya, and he would be able to lunge at Izuku, slamming him up into the air and going into 50% of full cowling access, just completely berating Izuku and absolutely slamming him straight into the ground. There was absolutely nothing that Izuku was able to do, and he was just completely getting overwhelmed by all the attacks that were getting landed on him. Eventually, Toya would finish his onslaught on Izuku, and Izuku would just be on the ground, just completely unconscious, finding himself inside of a Tartarus holding cell the very next day. And Izuku would be screaming, "Let me out! Let me out!" Right? Like just trying to break free. But Toya would be watching to him, talking to him behind a glass screen, as he asks him what led him to do this. Izuku doesn't answer him and says, "I hate you. I hate you with every fiber of my being. If it wasn't for you, I would have got the quirk. I would have became the #1. This never would have happened if you weren't born. And trust me, someday I'll get out of here. Someday I'll find everything you love and take it from you as well. And then we'll see how you like it when you're the one who's stuck inside of an infinite prison cell." From here, Toya says that's never going to happen, and Aizawa would be watching Izuku through the glass as well, using his erasure quirk, trying to kind of send a message of "you'll never escape," as Izuku would simply not say a word, and for the next couple of years would be detained inside of Tartarus, with the new successor of One For All being the one who reigns supreme, and people finding out about the altercation between All Might, his death, and even Bakugo Katsuki's death. They would hold a massive funeral, and from this would come everybody completely just berating Izuku, saying that they all knew that he was a failure from the start, and All Might should have taken notes and gotten rid of him when he had the chance, saying that it was all his son's fault that All Might died. His own son took their hero away from them. And everybody kind of hates Izuku, but all For One is still in Tartarus, mind you, and he still does live. So that does give us the option of potentially seeing Izuku come back once more. Villain Deku would maybe have a chance to come back, maybe even stronger than before. But that's for another day if you guys want that. If you guys truly want another bonus part and you guys want me to do something like that, then you guys are actually going to be having to smash a grand total of 1,000 likes on this video if you guys want me to even consider doing it. If you guys really want it, then smash 1,000 likes in the first 24 hours and I'll end up dropping it. But I highly doubt that. 9 years have passed since the passing of All Might and the incarceration of his son Izuku. The successor of One For All at this point has grown older and even had a family with Uraraka, with a son by the name of Robbie. He's a very young kid, and someday soon, he's actually going to do him the favor of making him the successor of One For All. After seeing the mistakes that his mentor All Might made, he decided that it's probably a better bet to actually give that right to his son instead of having him end up the same way that Izuku would have ended up with in this storyline. That said, after so many years of Izuku being in Tartarus prison, everyone's forgotten about the son of All Might. But the memory of All Might, it lives on in the hearts of everybody. Every year there's a celebration for All Might. every single year. People pull up with balloons, flyers, banners, onesies, costumes, everything you can think of, you name it. There is a parade in the honor of All Might in the downtown city of Japan where everybody praises him and they remember the loving memory of his son, and All Might, protector of Japan. But everybody just seems to throw the son that he once had under the rug. It's almost as if it's something that everybody just scraped underneath something and decided to everybody just forget about. Nobody cares about him and nobody likes to pay mind to that part of All Might's memory and or legacy. So the son of All Might's been all but dead to everybody. And in the minds of many people, nobody's really cared. Seeing as now we have a new lineup of heroes, with the number 1 hero being Toya, the successor of One for All. Number 2, Mirio Togata. Number 3, Shoto Todoroki. Number 4, Inasa, the wind hero whose last name I can't remember. Number 5, Nejire Hado and Tamaki, Sun Eater. With the new generation of heroes looking extremely promising, and even the kids that are currently in school looking as powerful as ever, nothing could go wrong in the eyes of the heroes. Everything has been smooth sailing ever since that day where UA had its biggest atrocity committed by the son of All Might. That day, a lot of heroes ended up actually exiting the UA school program due to the fact that a lot of them didn't want their kids in that school that couldn't even take care of their students, seeing as the death of Bakugo ended up causing a huge commotion in the world that took months and a year to finally stabilize. UA was shut down for a brief period in time until finally it was reinstated with new security and new vigor. All of the heroes ended up getting way more powerful because of this, and one thing that might be added is that Izuku, through his villainous actions, was actually able to turn things around in hero society and make people kind of start treating quirkless people with a bit more respect. Because it's kind of a story that people are told, like, don't disrespect quirkless people because, you don't want to turn somebody who's weak, you don't want to back them up into a corner because once you do, they're going to turn strong. So in a way, he kind of changed things for the quirkless people. But suddenly, everything changes. All for One would have been broken out of Tartarus many years ago and would have gone back into hiding, pulling strings in the underworld in a very low-key fashion type of way. But eventually the day would come 9 years later when, boom, a massive explosion would be heard from Tartarus. And who is going to break out, you may ask? Well, none other than Izuku Yagi, the son of All Might. News reporters on this incident would begin going viral, and videos of the biggest escape in all of Tartarus history would take place, with multiple villains being broken out with the help of All for One and Kurogiri alike, as well as members of the League of Villains like Twice, Spinner, Toga, and Dabi himself. All older and all far more dangerous and powerful than ever, all there to compete with the new generation of heroes. Izuku, as he would be taken off his shackles, he would finally breathe in a sigh of air as he says with a smirk, "Took you long enough, old man," as All for One smiles underneath his mask and says, "Oh, I know, but now it's time for revenge, and revenge will be ours." As suddenly, Izuku would laugh and proceed to use his quirk to decay the prison walls, freeing some inmates that he would have met during his time in Tartarus. Many powerful individuals with villainous quirks such as Lady Nagant and a few other randoms with powerful quirks that he would have gained respect for over his time in Tartarus. Eventually, the day would come when heroes arrive on the scene, eventually minutes would pass and heroes would end up arriving on the scene, but with so many villains on the loose, many heroes would actually end up losing their lives on this day trying to stop them, and ultimately, the villains would all make it away, with only a couple villains being stopped by the heroes, making it to their brand new lair for the League of Villains, where All for One would reintroduce his successor, with Izuku smiling, laughing, and having a grandiose time. He's finally free. After 8 miserable years of being held prisoner, he can finally exact his revenge on that person who has done him wrong, who ruined his life in the eyes of Izuku. And now, he's gonna make sure that he suffers just as much as he has for the past 9 years that he was cooped up in that damned prison. For now though, he's gonna celebrate like never before, for he and many other prisoners have finally broken out, and they finally get to have a taste of freedom. On this day, Izuku would end up meeting those like Toga, Twice, and Dabi. And let's just say that Izuku and Toga, they hit it off together. You know, they start studying and stuff, they start training a little bit, but regardless, they have a pretty fun time. Simultaneously, on the other hand, however, Toya would begin having flashbacks to the memories of Izuku. That fated villain attack that pushed him beyond his limits and turned him into the man he was today. Memories of All Might dying right in front of him would begin going off, and Bakugo himself bless me, and Bakugo himself, among everybody else who would have died that day, would begin to have flashes in his head that would begin going off, with them not going away until finally Uraraka enters the room and asks him what's wrong. She sees the news report and realizes that the son of All Might is finally free. She says not to worry, that he'll stop him again, and Toya says of course he will, but he's not too sure because he hasn't done anything. It's already been a week and he hasn't made any move. Villain activity has remained exactly as it's been, and for now, all of the heroes would attend a gigantic meeting on the breakout, and where they would discuss the breakout of many villains and wonder when the villains will make their rooms, because the heroes are thinking that, you know, they're gonna do something, so they would be on extremely high alert, but for some reason it just doesn't come. 6 months would pass and crime rate would remain as low as ever, and they would wonder if they just wanted to be free or if they're working on something. But the one person that would lose tons of hours of sleep over this would be Toya, who would be constantly working on trying to find the location of Izuku and put him back into prison where he rightfully belongs. It's been years since he's visited Izuku. The last time he did, Izuku looked at him with these eyes of true hatred. It's something that he has never seen before. Someone with a stare like they could genuinely destroy everything in their life and feel pleasure from it. It was scary to Toya, and he couldn't believe that one person could bear that much hatred towards another. He never understood it. He never did anything to him. It's not his fault he was chosen to be the successor. Blame somebody else, but not him. But from here, one person who would essentially be having a pretty good time during this time would be All For One, who as of this current moment is creating a plan to take over Izuku. But Izuku, on the other hand, would be busy not letting that happen, because at this current time, Izuku for those last 6 months would have essentially been training and getting briefed on the #1 hero's powers, with All For One explaining that he has gotten very, very powerful, unlocking a multitude of quirks alongside One For All that would have the news media going crazy, and telling Izuku about a way to get just as much strength, if not more, with him gaining access to numerous new quirks, new abilities, new ways to make him suffer. And Izuku accepts every part of it, as he wants Toya to die so badly he'd be willing to give up the rest of his life for it, if it means that he can kill Toya and take everything from him, just like he took everything from him. For now, 6 months of unparalleled torture would begin, with Izuku having the same surgery that Shigaraki would have had in the original story, and him gaining access to All For One and new powerful quirks to help him fight against the successor of All For One, of One For All, such as flight, invisibility, enhanced senses, laser beam eyes, regeneration, and even an augmentation quirk, which takes his abilities to a whole new level, something akin to Kaioken, very, very similar to that of what the successor of One For All has. This would lead him to get even more strength than he already had, strength on par with Toya, and much, much more. Izuku, once woken up, would not be different, as he would simply seem more powerful than ever, and because the operation was a success, everything ran smoothly. He wouldn't have lost any part of his sanity, and he would still be the same vengeful man that we'd all expect. But once he awakens, he turns to All For One and says thank you. Thank you for being so dumb, as from here, he would grab onto the face of All For One and decay him completely, saying, "I'm done being underneath the shadow of anybody anymore. I don't need you." And from here, he would turn to the direction of the doctor, as he would say, "I know what you two try to do. You try to have him take over my body and mind. Pathetic. I trained my mind over the last 8 years. That was never gonna work. You think that I would just sit still and be taken over as you're joking. He would step over to the doctor and say to inject his cells into the new and improved version of the Nomus, the next generation kind, which are even more powerful than the ones shown in the war. Prime Allmight level. Actually, yeah, prime Allmight level type Nomus. They would create a grand total of 5 of those, and the rest of them would be high-end, followed by the ones that would have attacked in the USJ. During this time, he would give massive amounts of quirks to his men and train them up for a month, studying the new lineup of heroes and deducting their every weakness and strength, helping the villains get a one-sided, complete stomp over the heroes, and taking over as the rightful number 1, the most powerful in the world. He would also be aiming to take back what's rightfully his, the power of one for all. It's something that should have been given to him at the first place, and he's finally gonna make Hero Society pay for the way that they treated him for the last couple years. Izuku this time isn't planning on just killing Toya and taking one for all. He has something much, much worse. Ways of crushing him unlike anything before. But first, he has to pay a visit to his mother. He would call upon Kurogiri, and he would get teleported exactly to the old house where he grew up in. He would walk inside to see Inko with another kid and another man. He would sit down as she stares at him in complete fear, and he would ask how she's been. He would grab a cup off the shelf and sit down with a glass of water. As from here, he would ask her how she's been, and everybody around there would be scared. The younger kid would be told to go up to his room, and from here, Izuku would simply look to them as he would say, "Don't even try to call the police." As Izuku, looks at the husband, and he can tell that he just clicked the button. So Izuku proceeds to snap her new husband's arm, and say, "Calm down," unless he wants his son to pay the price. As from here, they would both stay completely silent and still, and he would proceed to look at Inko in the eyes as he would say, "I'm just here to catch up, Mom. I just want to ask you something." She would stutter, What is it, Izuku?" As he would say, "Why didn't you stop him from choosing someone else? Why did you just accept him when he chose his new successor? I thought if anybody would speak up, it would be you. But you failed me, Mom. And for that you die. You let him give it to somebody else who rightfully did not deserve it. You knew I trained my whole life for this, yet you still gave it to him. You, Dad, everybody who had supported me up to that point, you all just abandoned me. And the second that I didn't turn out the way that my father was, everybody shut the door on me. You all thought I was done for, but I'm not. And I'm more powerful than ever. And once I kill Toya and take one for all for myself, I'll be the strongest thing in the entire world. Nobody will stop me, and the strong will rule. But it sucks to say that you won't be able to live for that." As he would shoot a laser beam straight through her head, and he would walk up towards the new husband of Inko, as he would say, "Good riddance," decaying him as he would walk up to the room where his half brother would be, and he would take him with him by telling him that he's his older brother, and taking him over towards the League of Villains. Seeing as he hasn't done anything wrong, that same day Izuku would decide that he needs somebody to essentially be his right hand man, and who better than his half brother, who still isn't old enough to even understand what's going on. He would fill his heads up with the thought that his parents had simply abandoned him, and Izuku would then from here go on to essentially decide that it's about time he would get some payback on Toya. He would get a squad to find the location of Toya's family, and once found, a day later, Izuku teleports inside with Kurogiri, and while Toya would be out doing hero work, he would bust inside the house of Toya, only to see one small boy, Uraraka, and a nanny sitting there, only to pretty much smile as all of his men would surround the doors, not letting them escape, as they would click the record button, and Izuku would say, "Been a while, chubby cheeks," as he walks closer and says to the kids not to run, but to stay still. Izuku would look to the villains as they would begin to essentially all start laughing, and Izuku would say, "I wouldn't try to escape if I was you." As from here, Izuku would go on to record himself slowly killing Toya's family on video. He would do horrendous things to them and would proceed to laugh as he walks away, and would leak the video on the media the day of the All Might parade. He has decided that that's the day where everything's gonna change, because that parade will be held the next day. And while this would be happening, Izuku would have one throwaway villain stay in the house and be able to send Toya texts letting him know that everything is fine. No alarms would be triggered, and Toya would not find out about the death of his family until the next day. The All Might parade would be going on, and while everything seems happy and good-go-lucky, immediately a video on the biggest projector in the town would go off as they would all watch as Toya's family and pro hero Uraraka Uravity would lose her life, as well as his young child, to that monster. And him wanting to kill Izuku now. Now Toya understands that feeling of revenge that Izuku feels every day. And from here, we see Toya letting out the most gut-wrenching scream of pain in all of MHA. Nothing could rival the feeling of rage that Toya is feeling right now. But Izuku doesn't care. Izuku doesn't care whatsoever. He just wants Toya to suffer, and that he will. He'll make sure of it. Toya's gonna feel every little bit of pain that he once had to endure when he had to watch somebody else be the favorite to his father, while he simply sat in the background and could do nothing about it. Nothing at all. But now Toya will know what it feels like. And following this, Izuku would have multiple portals open up as Toya would stare right at the direction of Izuku. And all the heroes present and all the civilians would watch as Izuku would shoot a catastrophe level attack, which would immediately destroy many civilians and lives, cause just immediate damage upon the scene, and everybody would have to sit there and bear witness to Izuku's destruction, the catastrophe that would have just been unleashed on the entire world. Everybody has to watch as Izuku would kill millions, no, thousands of people, because millions can't be there, but hundreds of thousands, right? And every single hero that would still be alive after this, which would be many of the powerful ones, would immediately call for reinforcements. From here, an all-out battle would ensue as multiple villains from the League of Villains, Nomus alike, and even people who would be watching around who, have always wanted to be villains, but never really had a chance to do it, would even join in on the attempted assassination of every single hero that was around. Immediately, an all-out battle would ensue that would be massive. There would have literally been nothing in history quite similar to this. And Toya wouldn't care about anything other than Izuku. He would blitz towards the direction of Izuku with all power going full on out, as Nomus would jump in his way, and Toya would simply rip them to shreds, destroying Nomus on their way, and even defeating a couple of villains, making sure to take them out with brutal injuries as he makes his way towards Izuku, and Izuku would hold 20 shields in front of him as Toya lets out an all-out punch, which would shatter 15 of them, as Izuku would laugh and use a wind attack to shoot Toya back. He would say, "I'm happy to see you too, buddy." As from here, Toya would say, "Why are you doing this? Why are you doing all of this to us? You're destroying many lives. For what? For what? Because your father didn't pick you to be the successor? You killed my family, damn it. You took everything from us." And from here, Izuku begins to laugh, saying, "I took that from you? You took my life from me. 9 years I spent held up in that prison, that damn prison, losing my sanity along the way. And finally, when I came out, I had to go through unparalleled torture just to get to the spot that I'm at now. You don't know what it feels like to have your life ripped away in front of your eyes, to have your father idolize somebody else, to lose everything you ever worked for. You'll never understand because you've always had it great. And now you're finally gonna get to know what that pain slightly feels like. Izuku would blitz in with all out strength. Blows would be coming in from all angles as literal sonic booms would be heard from the clashes of fists. Bam, bam, punch, kick, everything, you name it. Izuku even himself would shoot laser beams at Toya, which would miss at some points, and Toya would try to shoot energy beams at Izuku, which he would have developed from his final quirk. Finally, Fajin would begin to be used by the successor of One for All, and Izuku would use his enhancement quirk. He would begin to use his body on full throttle, and Izuku would begin to let out every single bit of quirks that he has inside of him. One quirk that allows him to repel all damage done to himself to his enemies. Toya would land a flurry of attacks on Izuku, which would do heavy damage, but because of this quirk, the damage would all be reflected onto Toya, and Toya would feel so much pain unlike anything before, as Izuku would regenerate immediately and proceed to blitz at Toya as he proceeds to bunch him over and over and over. Eventually, Izuku would grab him by the leg and throw him through 17 buildings as he jumps from one side to another and stomps on the chest of Toya, immediately beginning to drive his foot into his chest and say, "How does that feel, new number one? You took everything from me, and now you're gonna have to watch as everything's taken from you." He points to the side where the festival would be going down, and Izuku would say, "And now you finally get to die, but I'm not gonna make your death an easy one. Nah, you don't get that easy treatment. You're gonna have to get tortured every day of your miserable life." He would proceed to snap Toya's legs like a twig, and he would decay his arms, as from here Toya would be left with no legs and decayed arms, as Toya would be letting out cries of pain unrivaled to anything ever, and Toya would be begging for mercy as of this moment, with Izuku smiling and laughing. Immediately more portals would open as more Nomus would come out, and many people would lose their lives on this day. Eventually the attack would be known as Japan's the biggest, like I don't know what the name would even be called, but it would be called something, right? And it would just go down in the history books as the greatest attack in all of Japan ever. The day that the world stood still, and from here heroes from all over the world would attempt to try to help them out, but nothing would work. Hero Society would never recover, and Izuku would gain his goal of becoming the most powerful thing in the world. Izuku would take over in the position that All for One had started, and Izuku would live the dreams of All for One through himself, never turning back and never going back to wonder if anything he did was wrong, right? But one good thing that would come out of this would be that Izuku's brother, his half-brother at the very least, would actually grow up to be a very competent second-hand man to Izuku, and Izuku would spend the rest of his life taking over each individual country with his large army of villains and become the leader of the world, entirely destroying the entirety of Japan, United States, the United Kingdoms, everything. He literally destroys everything. And that would be that. What did you guys think? Did you guys like the ending? Did you guys think that I fumbled the bag? I personally just have to say really quickly, I love you guys, okay? Like seriously, I did not expect you guys to even want the bonus part, much less get anywhere near like 500 likes. But you guys absolutely destroyed it. I'm almost positive that by now you guys already hit 1.5k likes on the third part. Who does that? Literally nobody does that on the third part of the video. That's insane. And I hope that you guys go on to like this video and help the movie do way better in the algorithm. But with that all out of the way, guys, I love each and every single one of you guys. Seriously, it has been your boy Xehther, and I am out. Peace.